The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast harsh shadows across the crystalline desert as Jackson guided his exploration rover through the maze of mineral formations. The geological survey mission had been routine until now. Catalog resources, map terrain, avoid the native wildlife. Standard protocol for a frontier world still in its assessment phase. Emma's voice crackled through the comm from the orbital station. Jackson, you're approaching grid 77 Alpha. We're picking up some unusual biosignatures in that sector. Define unusual, Jackson replied, adjusting his course toward a cluster of towering crystal spires that jutted from the sand like frozen lightning. Large concentration of Zarathi life forms, but the patterns are strange. They're arranged in a perfect circle, almost ritualistic. Jackson had studied the Zarathi during his xenobiology training. The reptilian species was one of the few sentient races humanity had encountered since venturing beyond their solar system. They were impressive creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall when fully grown, with scales that could shift color for camouflage and natural armor that could deflect small arms fire. More importantly, they were fiercely territorial and protective of their young. As Jackson crested a dune, the scene below made him brake hard. A ring of adult Zarathi stood motionless in the sand, their scales a deep crimson that spoke of agitation or anger. In the center of their circle sat something small and white, painfully white against the golden sand. Emma, are you seeing this through my helmet cam? Copy that. My xenobiology database is running the analysis now. A pause. Jackson, that's a Zarathi hatchling in the center, but something's wrong with the coloration. Jackson zoomed in with his visor's optical enhancement. The creature was barely the size of a house cat, its scales pure alabaster where they should have been the mottled brown and gold of a healthy hatchling. It sat perfectly still, not from calm but from obvious exhaustion. Its small chest rose and fell rapidly, and even from this distance Jackson could see it trembling. Albinism, Emma's voice was quiet. The hatchling is albino. According to the cultural files, Zarathi society views genetic anomalies as cursed. They exile them. They're just going to leave it there to die? It's their way, Jackson. The circle is ceremonial. They're saying goodbye before abandoning it to the desert. Jackson watched as, one by one, the adult Zarathi began to walk away. Their movements were slow, almost reluctant, but determined. Within minutes, the small white figure sat alone on the vast expanse of sand. Jackson, don't even think about it. Emma's voice carried a warning tone. First contact protocols are clear. We don't interfere with indigenous customs, no matter how harsh they seem to us. But Jackson was already climbing out of his rover. The moment his boots hit the sand, the abandoned hatchling's head snapped toward him. Large golden eyes, the only part of it that held normal coloration, fixed on this strange bipedal creature approaching from across the dunes. Jackson, get back in the rover now. Look at it, Emma. Jackson moved slowly, hands visible and empty. It's just a baby. The hatchling didn't flee as Jackson approached. Instead, it made a sound, a soft melodic chirping that the translation software in Jackson's helmet identified as distress calls mixed with something else. Hope, maybe. Jackson knelt in the sand a few meters away. The little creature looked even more fragile up close. Its white scales were already showing signs of sunburn from the harsh radiation of the twin suns, and its small body was clearly dehydrated. The Zarathi have perfect eyesight, Jackson said into his comm. But this little guy's albinism probably means he's photosensitive. He'll never survive in their desert culture. That doesn't make it our problem, doesn't it? Jackson slowly reached into his pack and withdrew a water container. Emma, run a biological compatibility scan on standard electrolyte solution. Jackson, please. A long pause. Compatibility confirmed. But Jackson, even if you save it now, what then? You can't take it back to Earth, and its own species has rejected it. Jackson poured a small amount of water into his palm and extended it toward the hatchling. The creature's nostrils flared, and it caught the scent of moisture. Desperate thirst overcame caution, and it crawled forward on stubby legs to lap at the water. Then I guess we'll have to find another way, Jackson said. Over the following weeks, Jackson defied orders and stayed on the surface longer than scheduled. He set up a temporary shelter near the crystal formations, close enough to monitor the hatchling, whom he'd started calling Prism because of how the white scales reflected light, but far enough to avoid interfering with normal Zarathi territory. The transformation was remarkable. With regular water, shade during the harshest parts of the day, and supplemental nutrition, Prism began to thrive. More importantly, he began to trust Jackson completely. The little Zarathi would follow the human around the camp, chattering in his musical language and even attempting to help with simple tasks. "The bond you've formed is unprecedented," Emma admitted during one of their daily check-ins. "Our xenopsychologists are fascinated by the behavioral data." "He's not data, Emma. He's just a kid who needed someone to care." That caring paid off in unexpected ways. Prism's unique condition, while making him unsuitable for traditional Zarathi life, gave him abilities his normally pigmented relatives lacked. His pale scales made him nearly invisible against the crystal formations, and his light sensitivity had developed his other senses to extraordinary levels. He could detect mineral deposits through subtle vibrations in the ground and could navigate the crystal maze even in total darkness. The breakthrough came when Prism led Jackson to a hidden cavern system filled with rare earth elements that would make the planet incredibly valuable for terraforming and technology development. The discovery changed everything. When the first diplomatic mission arrived to establish formal relations with the Zarathi, they brought Prism with them. The young Zarathi, now grown larger and more confident, served as an intermediary between the two species. His unique perspective, rejected by his own kind but nurtured by humans, allowed him to bridge the gap between two very different ways of thinking. Years later, as Jackson watched Prism address the Galactic Council as the first Zarathi human cultural liaison, Emma's voice came through his personal calm. "You know, the xenobiologists still argue about whether you violated the Prime Directive that day." Jackson smiled as Prism's melodic voice filled the council chambers, speaking of cooperation between species and the value of protecting those who are different. "Maybe I did," Jackson replied. "But sometimes the right thing to do isn't found in protocols. Sometimes it's found in seeing someone who needs help and choosing to help them, regardless of the consequences." The albino hatchling, who had once sat hopeless in the sand, now stood as a symbol of what could be achieved when compassion transcended cultural boundaries. And in the end, it wasn't just Prism who was saved that day. It was the beginning of a new chapter in human-Zarathi relations, built on the simple human principle that no child, regardless of species or differences, should be abandoned to die alone.